Radio with Dr. David Kolbaba, Saturday mornings at 11. Visit healthquestradio.com.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. He was not on the debate stage last Wednesday evening, but he is going to be on our stage, and we're happy to have him. He's former Texas Congressman Will Hurd. He served 3 terms as a member of the House Republican Caucus, district stretching from San Antonio to El Paso across along the southern border, I should say. Before that, he was a clandestine officer for the CIA. He's the author of the book American Reboot, and he's a Republican candidate for president in 2024. Will Hurd, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, Dan, I really appreciate you having me on.
So let's begin at the beginning, which is always the best place to begin. Why are you running?
Look, I'm running because there's a number of generational defining challenges that we're facing as a country that I think are not getting enough attention. We're at a time where the Chinese government is trying to surpass us as the global superpower, and every American should care about that, because if the Chinese government wins, that means the dollar is not going to go as far as we're used to having it go. Our 401ks and retirements are not going to last as long as we thought they were going to last. Our kids and our grandkids are not going to have access to the best paying jobs in the world. This is going to impact our way of life. We're at a time, another challenge we're facing with is new technologies like artificial intelligence are going to upend every single industry, not in 10 years, but in 2 or 3 years. And our kids have the worst grades in math, science, and reading that they've had this century. These are major problems. These are all things that I've seen through my time, whether it's dealing with foreign policy and national security, or being in Congress working on every legislative issue, or being in the private sector where I've worked with some of the most cutting edge technologies. I recognize I'm a dark horse candidate, but these challenges are going to determine whether America can, for the next 247 years, do what we've done for the last 247 years, and that's have a quality of life that it has been the envy of the world.
As a Congress member who dealt with, El Paso, Texas, and towns along the border, what would you do differently than President Biden is doing right now?
Sure, Amy. Thanks for that question. When I was in Congress, the area I represented was larger than 26 states. It was roughly the size of Georgia. I had 820 miles of the border, and it took me 10 and a half hours to drive across my district. I'm at 80 miles an hour, which was the speed limit in most of the district, but my wife found out it's not the speed limit in all of the district. And the things
I know it's a long state. Whew.
Yeah, it is. Look, this crisis that we're dealing with, let's get some stats on it, right? So more than 5.5 million people have come into this country illegally under Joe Biden. Each one of them have paid somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000 to a human smuggler. And these are only the people that we know. There's a thing called a gotaway, and those are people that have actually tried to sneak in. We knew that they were trying to sneak in, but Border Patrol wasn't able to apprehend them. The majority of these 5.5 million come across the border and give themselves up to Border Patrol. So if they're paying, let's say $10,000, that's $55 billion that human smugglers in Mexico are making. Okay, give some context to that number. The market cap of McDonald's is like $30 billion. Starbucks is like $25 billion, right? That's just human smugglers. We're not even talking about fentanyl. Fentanyl killed 109,000 people last year in the United States, twice as many that were killed from gun violence. And so the first thing I would do is stop treating everybody that comes into our country as an asylum seeker. This is a super wonky thing. Asylum is real. Asylum should be allowed for some people. Some people need asylum. But when everybody is abusing the asylum system, the people that need asylum are getting screwed.
No question.
And so right? So that's the first thing. Stop that. And guess what? You don't need Congress to do this. This is an interpretation that has been directed on how Department of Homeland Security should handle things. That's one. Point two, I would treat human smugglers and drug trafficking organizations as terrorist groups. What does that mean? I know something about fighting terrorists. When I was in the CIA, my job was to stop terrorists from coming to try to blow up our homeland again. I was in the CIA when 9/11 happened, and after 9/11, I had to stop nuclear weapon proliferators from bringing dirty bombs into our country, and I stopped the Chinese and Russian spies from trying to steal our secrets. Right, that was my job. Did in India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, a number of other places in between. And we are not making drug trafficking and human smuggling a national intelligence priority. Now,
Well, I mean, not interrupt, but there's a story out this morning that a smuggler who brought in Uzbek nationals has ties to ISIS, and they're trying to figure out who was brought in by this smuggler. So, I mean, like treating them as terrorist organization, we literally have terrorist organizations potentially involved in this racket.
Sure. So there's a list of suspected people that may or may not be connected to terrorists, and the highest number of people that have been captured in the last year on that. And it's not just the southern border anymore; it's also the northern border. In the last 9 months, the northern border Border Patrol on the northern border has apprehended more people than in the last 9 years combined.
Wow.
And now the aggregate numbers are still nowhere near what you're seeing on the southern border, but this problem is starting to become a issue on our northern border as well. So look, we should be treating fentanyl like a weapon of mass destruction. We do not allow the precursor elements of like a dirty bomb to come into our country. Why are we allowing a poison come into our country that's killing 109,000 Americans a year?
Would you?
Third thing I would do.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just on that point, what was your reaction to what Governor DeSantis said that he would send special forces into Mexico to essentially stop the cartels?
Sure. You can't invade our largest trading partner. I'm fine with having the military in cooperation with actions of the Mexican government, and not just the Mexican government. El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras. There's plenty of countries who have services that are willing to take the fight to the narco traffic to the drug trafficking organizations. And if they need equipment, support, training, all that kind of stuff, we should be doing that, right? And so unfortunately, right now, when it comes to Mexico, the U.S.-Mexican bilateral relationship is one of the worst it's ever been. Partly it's because of Joe Biden and not paying the right attention and understanding that the U.S., Mexico, and Canada should be doing a lot of more things together. It's also the Mexican president as well has his perspective on his role in the country. But the Mexican
why can't these three socialists get along? Obrador, Biden, and Trudeau. I mean, they're all reading from the same playbook. What's the problem?
Look, I'm with you on that, and guess what? That's why you're going to see some change probably in Mexico in the next election, and the Mexican public, right, are as frustrated with the drug smuggling and the human smuggling, and the fact that Lopez Obrador kind of says that fentanyl, Mexico has no role to play in the fentanyl crisis. That's just absolutely insane. The fact that you would have him denying that. But go ahead.
No, I just want to get to a couple other topics.
Sure, of course.
Since you weren't on the debate stage on Wednesday night, I wanted to get your reaction to the exchanges between Ramaswamy and Haley, Ramaswamy and Pence on Ukraine. Those exchanges and where you come down on our approach to Ukraine and repelling the Russian invaders.
Look, Mr. Ramaswamy has said himself he's only been paying attention to foreign policy for the last 6 months. I think it shows. We shouldn't kiss dictators' butts, plain and simple. And one of the questions I get asked the most about when I'm on the trail in places like New Hampshire and Iowa, it's a question about Ukraine. And usually it's nobody wants to see a forever war happen in Ukraine. and we shouldn't do that. But we should be helping the Ukrainians. And to me, a victory is pushing the Russians out of all of Ukraine, to include Crimea and Donbass. The United States has built an international order that benefits us, and when we don't defend that international order, it hurts us. And for 5% of the DoD budget, we've been able to dismantle the Russian military without having to send our sons, daughters, and spouses. I think that's a good deal. The problem is the Biden administration is not getting the equipment and material to the Ukrainians at the speed at which it can be effective. And that is the broader problem. This is going to have ramifications in places like Taiwan. If Ukraine loses, we can kiss Eastern Europe goodbye. They're going to go back to the orbit of Russia. We can also kiss Western Europe goodbye, because they're going to recognize that, hey, we can't trust America to have our back. So they're going to start dealing with the Chinese government. And it goes back to that first problem I identified. This is one of the ways the Chinese government is going to try to surpass us as a global superpower.
All right.
We need somebody in office who can address these issues on day one.
Understood. Do you think President Trump should be taken off the ballot using Section 3 of the 14th Amendment?
Look, I think putting this issue of Donald Trump to administrative folks, a lot of them who are not elected, is going to be more disastrous than not. I'm not a legal scholar, so the fact that this provision of the 14th Amendment has never been used. I've been clear in my criticisms of Donald Trump, and I think the best way to deal with Donald Trump is to actually beat him in an election, not in a courtroom or some administrative action.
That's fair enough. And with respect to the CIA, you're a clandestine officer for 9 years, as I mentioned at the outset. What is your assessment? It's like talking to former FBI agents about assessing where the agency's been taken by Comey and to really a similar extent at this point, in my view, Wray. So where the agency was taken under Brennan, its participation in the Russian collusion hoax, its participation in running interference for Joe Biden and the Hunter Biden laptop matter prior to the 2020 election. What's your assessment of where the CIA is today,
Sure.
and how much it should be trusted by ordinary Americans like us?
Sure. And look, Dan, I appreciate the question. And as someone who's come out of that world, it's frustrating to me that some of our former leaders have eroded the trust that the American public have in these institutions that are important. Look, John Brennan is no longer the head of the CIA. Let's make that clear,
Right.
and that's a good thing. I was critical of him. He put his thumb on the scale when it came to the old the report that assessed the 2016 elections. I was clear at that time when I was in Congress. I was on the House Intel Committee at that time. And unfortunately, some of our senior leaders have made bad decisions and ultimately political decisions that has hurt the rank and file. I will say this: the rank and file, the people that are in the CIA, are putting themselves in harm's way every single day and every single night in tough, dangerous places in order to collect intelligence to protect our homeland. If most Americans knew the amount of threats that we are dealing with on a daily basis, a lot of folks wouldn't come out of their house. And so when I say the rank and file move forward and are frustrated with their leadership, but they're going to continue to do their job to protect America. Former leaders that go on TV and act as if they have access to information other people don't. It's bad tradecraft as an intelligence official, and it erodes that trust that I've talked about. And so again, calling out and being critical of that, we can be critical of those leaders that have made those mistakes, but also still be supportive of the rank and file that keep us safe.
We can. It's just a question of, exactly where the problem is and how large it is, and that's what we're still trying to get our handle on, particularly more so in the FBI than the CIA. But Mike Morell's participation in that letter, that op-ed, that letter from all those intel officers prior to 2020 sort of is a stain that won't go away for obvious reasons. But I wonder on the FBI then, you've seen, again, you have somewhat different roles, but The FBI has a counter intel role too, and one wonders if maybe part of the, and we've talked to like Kevin Brock, the former assistant director of counter intel. One wonders if maybe it's not just a personnel problem, it's a mission scope problem, and that the FBI needs to be pared down a little bit, that Christopher Wray needs to go, I don't know if you agree, and that the FBI's mission needs to be tapered a bit to focus on domestic law enforcement and less so some of these sort of quasi domestic international, like checking the backgrounds of Syrian migrants back in the day, those sorts of things. Let's taper it. Let's get them out of election politics and focus on domestic law enforcement and supporting state and local domestic law enforcement.
Sure. Look, I think now, one, Chris, you asked about Ray. We need people in these positions that have trust of the American people. And when half the country loses trust, then it's time to try to find somebody else. And two, look, the problem has always been that these issues of the FBI or a rogue officer doing something that in order to chase some high-profile case and not checking, crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. There's a long history of that going all the way back to J. Edgar Hoover. And that issue and that problem, and whether it's training, how people get promoted, the focus of these entities needs to be evaluated. And so part of this, a law enforcement entity is never going to be able to do intelligence well. It's two very different muscle movements. It's two very different skill sets, and I think that's always when we've found these problems. You can go with the 2016 election, as an example of that. So I think restricting or narrowing the focus of the FBI and our federal law enforcement is always a good, healthy conversation to have. But you got to have the leaders in those places that people can trust. That does, and Congress has a role in that as well, in their oversight function of these agencies.
He is former Texas Congressman Will Hurd. He is a Republican candidate for president 2024. The website Hurd, that's Hurd, hurdforamerica.com. The book is American Reboot. Great to talk to you. Hope to have you back. We've got a lot of issues, including cultural ones we didn't have the time to get to, but love to have you back and continue this conversation.
Hey, Dan and Amy, I really appreciate y'all letting me come on at the time, and a lot of folks that are supporters of mine love your show, and I get emails about y'all. So thanks a bunch for the time.
Thanks so much.
Right. Thank you. We'll have you back soon. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560.